From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Sitting in tonight in Washington, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. The Soviet Union is not exploding, but it does appear to be coming apart at the seams. The threads that held the nation together are tearing and popping and unraveling by the hour. As Mikhail Gorbachev confronted the Supreme Soviet today, he warned that he will not preside over a country that seems determined to tear itself apart. Jim Laurie reports from Moscow.
The faces of those listening today reflected the ethnic and political differences that are threatening to tear the country apart. Everything is collapsing, Gorbachev said. He was as animated as he used to be in his glory days, but now he delivered a desperate plea for a new union treaty, for something to keep the country together.
I am for a renewed union, a reformed union. If that cannot be achieved, then I will resign and let someone else take these responsibilities. Nothing can be achieved if we cannot have a union.
Earlier, Gorbachev had a closed-door meeting with Republic leaders. They discussed the idea of a loose confederation with at least economic ties. He told reporters now is the time for quiet dialogue. Republics must be persuaded not to take hasty actions. But as he met in Moscow, the disintegration continued elsewhere. Cheers and embraces in the Moldavian parliament. And champagne flowing outside. Moldavia became the 5th republic since the coup to declare its independence, the 7th overall. And new rifts may be opening up between Russia and republics like Kazakhstan over borders. Their leaders have always made a great show of friendship, but a spokesman for Russia's Boris Yeltsin warns that republics where many ethnic Russians live should not think about leaving the Union without first discussing changes in the borders.
In many cases, in the majority of the cases, for example, the border between Kazakhstan and Russia is just a line on the map. We should clarify this issue.
Nazarbayev, the Kazakh leader, warns that kind of talk will open the dangerous possibility of inter-republican war like that in Yugoslavia. There was today agreement with Gorbachev that some kind of treaty among the republics was needed, but nobody can agree on just what kind, and until they do, a dangerous vacuum exists which no one can fill. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
The list of nations recognizing the independence of the Baltic states continues to grow. The European community today granted recognition to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and said the European nations would be sending ambassadors in the next several days. All the same, the Baltics still must clear a number of hurdles on the road to full independence. John Donvan is in Lithuania.
It was by no means a crucial document the Lithuanians signed this evening, only a treaty on cultural exchanges with France, which just established diplomatic relations with Lithuania. Yet to the Lithuanians, it was another symbol of their growing independence from Moscow. But one symbol of Lithuania's half-century of domination by the Soviet Union is still very much here. The thousands of Soviet troops stationed in the Baltics, who right now are showing no signs of leaving. The only troops to have abandoned their barracks in recent days were the riot police known as Oman, who pulled out on Saturday night, but only to a nearby Soviet army base where they await new orders. Today, their commander admitted his men are afraid to leave the base, fearing attack by Lithuanians, who despise the Oman soldiers. Meanwhile, with thousands of regular Soviet troops on their soil, it appears that the Baltics will, for some time to come, be in the position of saying they're independent while still playing host to foreign forces. All that Lithuanian officials can say is that the Soviets have promised in principle to withdraw the Oman troops and to talk about the rest.
It is not only a question between Lithuania and the Soviet Union. It is an integral part of disarmament all over Europe.
Meanwhile, Lithuanian volunteers continue training for their new National Guard, many with hunting rifles, and improving on the barricades around Parliament. Lithuanians, it appears, are still wary of a military move by the Soviets. As one senior guardsman said today, never trust the Bolsheviks. John Donvan, ABC News, Vilnius.
The United States still has not recognized the Baltic states, but that may soon be changing. President Bush told reporters today he might have something more to say on the subject on Friday. The president is also under increasing pressure to come up with some gesture of economic aid for the Soviet Union. Here's ABC's David Ensor.
When Ambassador to Moscow Robert Strauss and other advisors came to meet with the president today in Maine, one of the things they talked about was how much to help the Soviet economy and when. Mr. Bush has made no promises so far. Critics say it is high time he did.
The West needs to act now, and the temptation to sit back on the sidelines and say, let's wait for events to clarify, is a mistake.
2 months ago, Allison and others at Harvard worked with Soviet economist Grigory Yavlinsky on what they called a grand bargain. The West would make huge investments in the Soviet Union if the Soviets would move towards a market economy. Back then, neither side was ready for such a sweeping proposal. Now, the Harvard men say Mr. Bush should at least promise some money in order to strengthen pro-Western reformers.
I don't want to guess how much it is. It's billions and billions of dollars over an extended period, but the point is that it can't be done on the cheap.
But other analysts praise the administration for its restraint.
In our economic system, a president cannot commit the government to huge amounts of money. That money has got to come from the private sector. And if the president overpromises, he will simply mislead the Soviet Union.
It may not be Mr. Bush's style to come up with an expensive vision, a Marshall Plan for the Soviet Union. Aides say he will help substantially when the time comes. But he believes that transforming the economy is mostly up to Moscow and the republics. David Ensor, ABC News, the State Department.
In a moment, the news media in the Soviet Union out from under government control. On the American agenda, letting the private sector take over public services. And a visit yesterday that the men who led the coup are being charged with high treason. If convicted, they could receive the death penalty. In Moscow today, there were moves to take teeth out of the Soviet Communist Party. The country's state bank has frozen all the party's accounts, and that's not all. Now, the newspapers and television stations that had been controlled by the party or the government all these years are also being given some unaccustomed freedom. ABC's Jim Hickey is in Moscow.
In the antiquated composing room of the newspaper Izvestia, they did something radical today. They removed all the communist symbols from the masthead.
So on the old paper, you had Lenin, the Socialist Labor emblem, and the Communist Party slogan.
Yes, and the state seal.
And on the new paper?
We have none.
It's all gone.
Yes.
And they posted notices. The paper's Communist Party chapter has been disbanded. With government approval, Izvestia is going private, financially and editorially.
Now we've gone completely independent.
TASS, the Soviet news agency, has been a state propaganda tool since 1925. Not anymore. Reporters here have also decided to become independent.
Freedom of expression, freedom of the press were the only positive results of perestroika so far, and I think that this is something that we attach great importance to, and this is something we always wanted to have.
Government control over the broadcast media is disintegrating as well. President Gorbachev, with the reported approval of Boris Yeltsin, today appointed the liberal-minded editor of Moscow News as new chairman of state radio and television. Yet for all the progressive changes, Yeltsin has been accused of violating freedom of the press by suspending Pravda and 5 other Communist Party newspapers.
We should allow them to express themselves freely.
Although Pravda printing presses remain silent, the new Minister of Information said tonight it will be allowed to resume publishing under certain conditions.
They can follow the party line, they can follow any line, as long as they are not owned by the party.
And that, apparently, will be the new Democratic line. Communist propaganda will be tolerated. Communist control will not. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Moscow.